It was just another day in Tulsa, Oklahoma. People were walking to work, grabbing coffee, checking their phones. And then, it happened. A sound that didn't belong. A gut-wrenching crash. A man, stepping outside for a cigarette, turned his head. And what he saw stopped his breath. A man was falling from the 25th floor. For a brief moment, it looked unreal. Like a movie. Like something that couldn't actually be happening. His arms flailed, his body twisted, as if desperately trying to grab onto anything. But there was nothing. And then, impact. A human body hitting the pavement from 17 stories high. For a few seconds, silence. Then, panic. A crowd began to gather. Some stood frozen in shock. Others scrambled for their phones. "Oh my God, call 911. It didn't take long for the sirens to arrive. The closer the officers got, the worse the scene became. A 23-year-old man lay motionless on the concrete. His name? Joshua Hilberling. But what made this even more unsettling was what they saw above. A broken window. And behind it, a woman. She wasn't screaming for help. She wasn't a bystander. She was the reason he had fallen. Her name was Amber Hilberling. And then, she confessed. "I pushed him," she cried. "But I didn't mean to." Wait. She pushed him. Not he slipped. Not he jumped. Not an accident. She pushed him. That changed everything. Because now, this wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a potential crime. But here's where things don't quite add up. Amber was 5 feet 5 inches and pregnant. Joshua was 6 feet 4 inches, a former Air Force serviceman, strong and physically fit. Could she really have pushed him hard enough to send him crashing through a window? Or was there something that had been building for a long time? Because here's the thing, this wasn't the first time Amber and Joshua had fought. And if you think this was just one bad argument gone wrong, you're in for a shocking truth. Love is supposed to feel safe. But for Joshua Hilberling, home wasn't safe. It was a place of yelling, fighting, violence. And yet, he stayed. Because, like so many people in toxic relationships, he thought he could fix it. That decision cost him his life. The warning signs. Joshua and Amber weren't always like this. They fell in love fast. Got married young. It all seemed perfect. But the cracks started to show early on. Joshua's family saw bruises. His brother, Zach, tried to warn him. "You have to get out," Zach told him. "She's going to hurt you." And he was right. Amber threw things. Hit him. Screamed at him. One night, she grabbed a floor lamp and smashed it into his head. Another night, she shoved him down the stairs. That should have been the final straw. Joshua filed a restraining order. But when officers arrived to serve it, Joshua laughed it off. He stayed. And the cycle started again. The breaking point. June 7, 2011. Joshua had finally had enough. He packed his bags. He called his father and said, "I'm done. I can't stop Amber from using drugs while she's pregnant. I need to leave." His father told him, "I'll come get you after work." Joshua never made it that far. Because just moments later, he would be falling from the 25th floor. A last plea? Or a murderous rage? So what happened inside apartment 2509 that day? Amber said it was an accident. She said Joshua was standing by the window, fixing the TV when she pushed him. She didn't mean to. But a neighbor heard something different. First, they heard Joshua shouting, "No. No. No." Then, the sound of running. Then, the crash of breaking glass. Then, Amber's scream. That sequence of events tells a very different story. If Joshua was saying, no. 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 What was he saying no to? If there was the sound of running. Was he running toward the window? Or away from something? And if Amber didn't mean to hurt him? Why did she scream the moment he fell? This wasn't just a tragic accident. This was something much darker. But what if I told you, there was still one last piece of evidence? A key witness. A shocking confession. And the truth about what really happened on the 25th floor. We'll dive into that next. A confession is only the beginning of the story. For detectives, words mean nothing without proof. So they needed more from Amber Hilberling. She had already admitted to pushing Joshua. But was she telling the truth? Or was this just the version of the story that made her look innocent? They sat her down in the interrogation room. And what she said only made things more complicated. Amber's story versus the evidence. Amber looked fragile. Vulnerable. She sobbed, gasping between words. I never meant to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop yelling at me. That's how she described it. According to her, Joshua was angry that day. He was aggressive, throwing things. And she? She just pushed him. A small push. Just enough to get him to back off. But the detectives weren't convinced. Because let's stop and think for a second. If Amber's push was so small, how did a grown man, 6 feet 4 inches, a former athlete, crash through a window with enough force to fall 17 stories? And why, right before the glass broke, did their neighbor hear running? If Joshua was standing near the window, why would anyone be running? None of it made sense. The detectives' questions. One detective leaned in. His voice was calm, but firm. Amber, why did your neighbor hear running? Amber froze. I don't know. Maybe Joshua was. Was he trying to leave? Her lips parted slightly. A hesitation. No, he was just standing there. But they knew that wasn't true. Because minutes before he fell, Joshua had packed his bags. He had called his dad, saying he was done. He was leaving Amber for good. Was that why she pushed him? Because she knew this was the last time she would ever have control? Did she act out of fear, or out of rage? The word she couldn't take back. Amber was exhausted. She had spent hours talking, her emotions bouncing from sadness to anger to numbness. And then, she said something she couldn't take back. They were right. They said if we stayed together, I was going to kill him. The room went silent. Wait. Who was right? Had Joshua's family already predicted this ending? Had Amber herself felt this coming? And if so, could this really be just an accident? Or was this a tragedy years in the making? The police weren't the only ones who doubted Amber's story. Because when it was time for her day in court, the jury saw something she didn't expect. A video of her own words. A confession she never meant for them to hear. And what happened next would seal her fate. Stay with me, because this case is about to take its final turn. Amber Hilberling had a choice. Take a plea deal and serve a reduced sentence. Or fight in court, risking a much longer prison term if she lost. She chose to fight. She thought she could convince the jury that it was all just a tragic accident. But the moment the prosecution revealed what they had against her, she knew. She had lost. The damning evidence. The courtroom was packed. On one side, Joshua's family, devastated. On the other, Amber's supporters, convinced she was being wrongly accused. But when the prosecution played the recording, everything changed. The jury listened. It was Amber, back at the police station, in the moments after Joshua's death. And her voice wasn't hysterical. She wasn't pleading for help. She was calm. Unshaken. "I pushed him. He's probably dead." The words hit like a punch to the gut. If Amber was so devastated by what happened, why did she sound so unmoved? Why didn't she say, "Oh my God, it was an accident"? Why didn't she scream, "I didn't mean for this to happen"? Because here's the truth, what people say in the heat of the moment matters. And in that moment, Amber wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was stating a fact. The jury didn't hesitate. Amber's defense team tried everything. They argued that Joshua had a drug problem. They claimed Amber was afraid of him. They tried to make the jury see her as a victim. But the evidence was too strong. The history of violence. The neighbor's testimony. The fact that Joshua was trying to leave. And then, Amber's own words, sealing her fate. The jury left the room to deliberate. They didn't need long. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Guilty of second-degree murder. Amber sat motionless. Her supporters gasped. Joshua's family broke down in tears. And just like that, Amber Hilberling's future was set in stone. 25 years behind bars. But Amber's story didn't end in court. Because years later, in a prison cell, she would make one final decision. A decision that left even her biggest critics questioning, was she really the villain, or was she just another tragic figure in this story? Stay with me, because the ending is one you won't see coming. Amber Hilberling went to prison at 19 years old. She was supposed to spend 25 years behind bars. She didn't even make it 5. On October 24, 2016, Amber was found dead in her cell. Some called it justice. Others called it another tragedy. But no matter which side you're on, this story ended in the worst way possible. Amber's final days. Amber struggled in prison. She was young, alone, and constantly under scrutiny. She tried to stay strong, but over time, the weight of it all became too much. She wrote letters to her family. She spoke about her son, about missing him, about wanting another chance. She even reached out to a news station, wanting to tell her side of the story again. And then, just one day later, she was gone. 'Cause of death. Suicide. But Amber's family never believed it. They claimed she was targeted, that someone in prison had hurt her. Could that be true? Or had Amber finally given up? What can we learn from this? This story isn't black and white. Was Amber a cold-blooded killer? Or was she a victim of an abusive relationship that went too far? Was Joshua the aggressor? Or was he just trying to leave? No matter what you believe, one thing is clear. This didn't have to happen. If Joshua had left earlier, would he still be alive? If Amber had gotten help for her anger, would she have avoided this fate? If someone had stepped in before things spiraled, could this tragedy have been prevented? It's a lesson for all of us. Toxic relationships don't get better. They either end, or they destroy lives. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, speak up. Because once things go too far, there's no undoing it. Final thoughts and call to action. What do you think? Was this justice? Or was this just a tragic case of two people who should never have been together? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love true crime stories that make you think, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, there's so much more to uncover.